In this video, I'm going to share practical science-based tools for overcoming mindless scrolling on social media. Because if you are like I was, I found myself wasting so much time on social media. Checked my screen time, saw that I spent hours somehow on YouTube and Instagram, not even realizing where that time came from, only to notice later that whenever I had a break in the day, I was just pulling out my phone, watching just stupid random videos, and not realizing how much that was affecting my motivation and ability to do things that would actually improve my life. And so for me, and I think for most people, the intention of going on social media was innocent in the beginning. We wanted to see what was new. We did it for entertainment. And then later, it became such a strong habit, even an addiction, I would say, that we needed it just to feel good and to cope with stress. And every few moments, I pulled out my phone until eventually I had wasted half my day. And so, to explain a little bit more why this works so we can understand how to actually change it, I want to share a little bit about how dopamine works in our brain. So if you don't know, dopamine is a chemical in our brain that has a lot to do with our motivation and our pleasure. And so we have this sort of baseline level that's just flowing in our brain. And when we engage in a certain habit or an activity, our brain releases dopamine. And so when it comes to things like social media that feel super good, they're new, our brain thinks this is good for us, it releases a lot of dopamine and we get this spike. We feel really good in the moment. And so it uses up a lot of dopamine. And because our brain needs to create more, now that we've just used up a bunch, it leads to this crash afterwards while our brain is trying to restore to that baseline level. The problem with these addictive things is instead of giving our brain time to restore that, our brain just remembers how good it felt, and so it wants to feel that again. So we continue using that dopamine, leading to more spikes and more crashes, till eventually we find ourselves at this new, lower baseline level of dopamine, where we're not as motivated to do things that would require effort or improve our lives. This is where I found myself with scrolling social media, addicted food, video games, all sorts of dopaminergic habits that made it really hard for me to study in college, to want to work out or improve myself in any way. I just wanted to be online constantly. And so I knew something needed to change. And so I'm going to share two big practical tools that helped me and I hope will help you as well. So the first is figuring out how to actually replace this sort of dopamine source that social media is for us. And so while we're not going to want to find something that will spike our dopamine in the same way, because that'll just continue leading to crashes, we can find something that will bring a sort of steady increase in dopamine. And the key here is doing something that requires effort, something in the real world. These things lead to a steady increase rather than a crash. And we can kind of get a hint on what would be a good replacement for scrolling for us in what we actually watch on social media. So for example, if you love watching exercise shorts, a bunch of fitness influencers, then you would probably like creating your own exercise program, doing some sort of movement or exercise for yourself. You could do activity snacks in your free time instead of pulling out your phone. This is going to lead to that natural increase in dopamine instead of a spike, and it's not going to mess with your motivation. So you could apply that to whatever you like to watch on social media. Now, if the reason you watch social media isn't something that you can realistically engage in, a few things can help. Number one is first engaging in more long forms of the entertainment. When we engage in short form content like Reels or YouTube Shorts, that's going to spike our dopamine a lot more than watching a movie or a TV show. Second is just figuring out a more healthy form of entertainment for you, getting some sort of hobby that you can engage in your free time. Now for me, one of the big things I loved scrolling on social media was actually cooking videos. And so these highly edited videos were very entertaining. And although it took hours for people to make, the video was only 5 seconds and it gave me that spike in dopamine. And so what I replaced that with was actually learning to cook for myself. And so now that is a big chunk of my day, and it gives me a sort of steady source of dopamine by creating something for myself in the real world, by cooking for myself. And so I hope this helps you to figure out how you can replace scrolling. Another big way we can replace scrolling is with healthy ways to deal with stress, because a big reason we engage in scrolling mindlessly is because we don't realize that we're just feeling a bit stressed, we're feeling a bit worried about something, or maybe our dopamine is just low, and so our brain knows we can feel better if we just spike our dopamine real quick. Just get on Instagram, flip through real quick, we'll feel better. And a lot of us do this to cope with stress because it's so easy. We may not even consciously be aware of it. But what our brain doesn't realize is that it's just going to keep leading to a crash, and it's not going to actually solve the problem of what we're stressed with. And so we need to figure out how can we replace this coping mechanism in a way that's not going to spike our dopamine. And so there are tons of different ways that people do this. It really depends on you and what is going to help you to deal with stress. For me, I mentioned before, I like to cook. I like to take deep breaths, take a minute to think about what I'm really stressed about. Maybe I can have a different perspective on the situation, and that will just immediately make things better. And I'll realize, I don't need to scroll. Or maybe I'll go for a walk or do some sort of exercise. And so experiment with different things and figure out what helps you to cope with stress. The second main tool I want to share with you to make scrolling go from a habit to a conscious behavior and one you can quit is through mindfulness. And so right now, we pull out our phone, we scroll at different times during the day, specific times, and in specific places where our mind has been trained to think, okay, this is where we get on social media, this is where we relax, this is where we de-stress. And it's become a habit at those different times and in those different places. And the way that we break this habit, or at least one way, is by becoming consciously aware of when we do that in those places and at those times. And so when we pull out our phone and instead of just mindlessly scrolling, if we can think and just be aware and mindful that we are on social media while we're doing it, that habit is going to turn into a conscious behavior, and therefore it's not going to be a habit anymore. And while you may say, no, I'm done scrolling, I don't want to do that anymore, that may be tempting, but if we set unrealistic goals, we risk failing and giving up, thinking that it's impossible. And so it's better to set realistic goals and follow strategies that are proven to work. And so this strategy, it's how we change our habits. And so for the first week, it might be a more realistic goal to think, okay, I'm just going to try and be aware of when I get on my phone. I'm going to be conscious, I'm going to be mindful, and that over time is going to change it from a habit to a conscious behavior, and you're going to have more power to be able to stop that. And so the more that I did this, the more that I realized all the places and all the times that I was just habitually getting on my phone or eating food. I know I had a lot of bad habits. And the more that I changed that to a conscious behavior, I realized I could do other things. I could cope in different, healthier ways. I didn't have to engage in scrolling, and I gained more power to overcome that. So I actually want to give you one more bonus science-based tip when you're making these changes, and that's to reward yourself. And so another term for this is positive reinforcement. And so you might set a goal and say, I'm only going to scroll for 20 minutes total today. And if you reach that, you can have a reward set in place for yourself, and that's going to encourage you to keep going and keep making progress. And so for me, I love having a healthy snack that I can enjoy when I reach my goals. And so that really helped me to keep going and stick with it, because I knew I had this healthy brownie that I could eat if I actually stuck to it. So just to recap, we want to figure out why we scroll and replace it with something that takes effort in the real world. Replace it with a healthy coping strategy if that's why you scroll. And then we want to be aware. We want to try to practice mindfulness when we do scroll, so it changes from a habit to a conscious behavior. And then lastly, give yourself a reward. Set up some sort of reinforcement for yourself to encourage you to keep going. And if you're looking for even more strategies and tips for overcoming your addictive habits, then you can check out my other videos and subscribe for more. Or if you're looking for a more personal game plan and you're just sick and tired of your habits and want to change right now, then set up a time to chat with me. Click the link in the description and I would love to help you.